Line. Well, let me come back again. Good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. This is the Bottom Line, and my name is Kwesi Efriye. It's been a while, but we're back for God and country. Let me start from the point of the news about Global, which came out some few days ago, and the fact that they are exiting the country, which has brought up the discussion on the number of multinational companies that are exiting the country. There has been lots of issues about this, and it spans to the economy in general, inflation rates, conducive environment for these businesses to thrive, the tax rates, and all of these issues. And tonight, we want to be getting into these matters. Of course, as I do always, I will not pose it to be an expert. We gather experts here on this round table to give us how it is going to impact the economy. It is going to impact employment, for example. It is going to impact GDP, for example. It is going to impact the growth of our country, Ghana, and so on and so forth. Tonight, we have a number of experts who are going to gather to go into this matter and analyze what really the causes are. When we do what the causes are, we'll now get into what or how it is impacting our dear country, Ghana. I'll try to interrogate our guests tonight. So you want to stay with us. This is the Bottom Line. We are coming your way live from our studios here at Rage in Accra. We are live on DSTV channel 277. We are live on our Facebook pages, Metro TV News especially, and of course, Chairman Kwesi Efriye as well. When we come back, my guests are already in the studio, and I have some on Zoom as well. You want to stay with us. We'll be right back. Right, you welcome back from the break, and this is the Bottom Line. I told you earlier on that we are discussing the news about some multinational companies that are exiting the economy of Ghana for various reasons. And we are all aware that those who have spoken or issued out releases have cited one of two major reasons. Either they are having strategic alliances or they are having unfavorable environment for their businesses to thrive. And if you analyze it from the economic point of view or the taxation point of view or the business point of view, there are a number of reasons that you can ascribe. You can ascribe the issue of demand and supply. You can ascribe the issue of bad leadership. You can ascribe the issue of poor governance. You can ascribe lots of issues. And I told you earlier on that I always will not put myself on as an expert. But tonight, my business is to make sure that we engage the very experts in the sector, the financial and the business sector, the economic sector, to see what exactly is the problem. Is it the inflationary rates? Is it the taxation? Is it the exchange rate? Is it the prime rate? And everything that has to do with all of the conducive economic environment. When we are done with that, we'll try and do that within record time. And when we are done with that, we'll now speed up to look at how it will impact the economy. And I mentioned earlier on that we would look at specifically employment, we would look at GDP, we would look at productivity, we would look at maybe demand and supply. So I have in the studio, and you all know him by the lecture he's given us. Most of you have called on us to do that again. And once he's here, we'll be asking him if he would have the time to do that again. Francis Timor is a tax analyst and Chartered Institute of Taxation, Ghana. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Kwesi, for having me.
I hope you're doing well. It's been a while since we had you in the studio.
Exactly.
And the popular call is, are you going to come back to give us lectures again?
Always available.
So we should be expecting, we should be planning something very soon.
That is so.
Especially now that we have topics that we need your expertise on very regularly. We have Dr. Evans Juya, a financial economist and international financial consultant, also live on Zoom tonight. And Dr. Richard Etuahine, our very own, is also a banking consultant. Both of them are live on Zoom joining us. Now, good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on the program.
Dr. Tuahini, can we hear your voice briefly? Are you there? Can you hear us?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Right. Thank you very much, too. So let me begin from Francis in the studio. And as I said, that there are many causes. We've seen a number of these companies. If we are to list, at least at my last check, there were about 10. I can mention Global. So the last one we had, or we heard about, is Global, who has announced to stop operating effective the 10th of May 2024. Unilever Ghana has relocated its tea production to Nigeria as of March 2024. Big Pen, if you did the junior secondary school, not the high school, and the senior secondary school, you must have used Big Pen, has moved its operations to Ivory Coast in this year. Jumia, we all started using Jumia. Jumia Food shut down its operations in December 2023. Game Shopping Center. So for those of you who visited Accra Mall, the West Hills Mall, and other malls where Game Shopping Center closed down in December 2022. Dark and Lovely for those in the beautician industry. And then Bet365. I don't know whether that's because of the taxation of bets and so on and so forth. Citidia is a lighting company. They have also exited the country. Let me start with you, Francis. From your analysis, you are an expert.
Yeah.
What's the cause of all of these?
So we see a number of factors, and I think you also forgot to mention that Vodafone has also exited.
Exactly. Now tell us, Vodafone has exited.
Yeah, so while some are exiting completely, others are also having some replacement. But of course, immediately they come with new strategic alliance, and they have their own perspective. So for me, it's a great concern, in as much as we still have other companies operating like the MTNs and the other major operators in the country. Anytime you see companies moving as a result of economic challenges, then it creates some anxiety. Why? Because you see that people are going to lose some jobs. Certainly, people will have to, be moved away. But you listen to the business community and you realize that they attribute that to major challenges and some economic instability that they see. So typical of it is the exchange rate, the way the city is performing. And especially you talk to the FABAC, the Food and Beverage Association, their main concern has been that anytime they bring a container or they import and they want to go back again, their capital is almost wiped off because of the way the CD conversion is done. And those who produce in Ghana too are crying of, utility tariffs. Aside the power not being stable, the price of utility has also gone up. So at the end of the day, the cost of production is so high. And so it's a mixture. And for me, you look at the trend and it looks like everything started immediately after COVID entered our country, and we couldn't, manage the way the economic stability is supposed to be. And we have seen most of these companies moving away. Societe Generale has just announced that they are also moving away. And you can imagine the anxiety that the people who are working over there will have. So, in some ways, it's a great concern for us. And I pray that maybe those who are in charge of the economy, the management of the economy, may be able to, put some measures together to bring down the inflation, and then look at the way the currency is performing, and be able to create some stability in the business environment so that we can continue to have some, hopes for businesses to operate.
But in any case, the COVID has happened in every country. So if you're moving, where are you moving to? The places that you are moving to, they are also experiencing these hardships.
No, I think the way we handle it, everybody In fact, COVID didn't even start in Ghana. Those who experienced it for the first time they have been able to survive it. We couldn't handle it properly. Expenditure went overboard. Then we had to come and introduce new taxes in order to be able to, sustain the economy from collapse. And by introducing the taxes, it came too many. The indirect taxes came too many. So at the end of the day, businesses now had to find a way to survive. And so you can say, yes, COVID didn't happen in Ghana alone, it happened elsewhere. Others have been able to manage it better than the way we have been able to do that. You look at the way our debt level were. Countries borrow, but we had borrowed to an extent that we had gotten to a level where it was no more sustainable. And when taxes are collected, about 80 to 90% of it goes into the payment of interest and salary. So basically, there's nothing left for other payments that are needed for a country like Ghana to run. So it is the way we manage the whole situation, and probably because of the way we had managed our affairs from the past. So COVID only exposed us that we have not been very good for several years. We've not been good in managing our economy very well.
Now, let me just, I'm not supposed to at least begin reading the text messages now, but the question I asked, Ahmed from Tamale says, basically nobody is worried about these MNCs, multinational companies. This is what they do around the world outside of Europe as part of the agenda to destabilize nations. They are twins of the Bretton Woods. Eastern Europe got West economies and they operate there. The resilient ones will stay. The free riders will go and return. Ahmed in Tamale.
Not exactly, because see, multinationals operate with money from people, and largely, you look at the Western people, they operate with pensions. People who are on retirement, they have pensions money, so they come out with the expectation of how much they expect in terms of returns. And so, if they realize that they are not able to make money any longer from your country, they will normally say they are doing strategic realignment, and then they move. So you ask yourself, if we have inflation of 54%, can you continuously to operate in such a country? No. Look at the way our currency is, fluctuating. No, you can't do that. And people are expecting a return. They have a targeted return to get. So yes, we have people, or we have countries who are doing well in terms of attracting investors. Some companies are doing better, but those who do not have the strength to survive will have to realign and then move to other countries.
Let me come to you, Dr. Richard Etwahene, who is a banking consultant. I mean, for banking industries, within the industry, there are a lot of multinational companies. So should this be a matter of concern for us as Ghanaians? Are the MNCs or the companies that are moving not being overly sensitive to the factors of our economy? Maybe the inflation, they are being too sensitive to it. Or maybe they have their own bad leadership, or they have a penchant for too much profitability and those ones. And that's the reason why they are moving. Or is it a matter of bad economic management?
Thank you very much. And thank you to my other participants. I think from what the taxman has said, basically, we have mismanaged our economy. If you wouldn't mind, I'll give you some data.
Okay.
In December 2016, the dollar to the cedi rate was 4.16. The total debt, including the external debts and domestic debt, was 122.6 billion. I think we went on penchant of borrowing without actually appreciating the consequences, especially if you borrow and it goes into consumption, which we have done. That is the end point. The chemistry people will tell you that is titration. That is the end point. We borrowed massively on both international market and domestic market. But what have we got to show in assets of physical structure, like a fast train from Accra to Tamale? Even our roads is the least you talk about it. I was on Kumasi Road last Saturday. The least you talk about Kumasi, which is a major road, the least you talk about it, the better. So if you borrow, and instead of you looking at the strategic areas where you want to position your investment so that you can get it to pay back, and you decide to look at consumption, only consumption, then you have to pay through your nose. And this thing has gone on for too long. And it is very unfortunate. I remember when I said something about I think 2017, that the way we are borrowing will be paying through our nose. If you borrow, and you don't put into productive investment, repaying becomes very difficult. Currently, even interest, or even when we are not paying, this year budget alone, interest is 58 billion. It is only wages and compensation that's gone to 66%. And when you hear people that the IMF is doing debt reprofiling, debt rescheduling, we are only postponing payment of our future debt to today's debt into future. So if you don't have any productive sectors that would expand to grow to export, the years to come are going to face more serious challenge. And I'm not putting Ghanaians into fear. I am telling you from the Argentina perspective. In the 90s, they did similar thing. Greek is facing the same thing. Every 3 years, they go to IMF and borrow. So the beginning of our trouble is the way we borrowed consistently on the market. So short term, and it was not even long term, because it was pensions, this euro money, what we call the hot money. And it was borrowed, and if you ask me, what have we done? We have borrowed consistently, and even our energy-related issues for 10 years, 2014, as I'm talking to you now, we have been able to resolve it. Why? So what the tax man is saying is right.
Right.
But for the banks, you know, they said strategic alignment.
Yes.
You have branches all over the world.
Yeah.
And if the returns are not commensurate with your investment, you begin to exit. Stanchart, July 2023, they exited in Sierra Leone, Angola, Cameroon, Gambia, and one other African country. The complaints were that they are not getting equitable returns on their investment. The reason being is that Ghana currency, if you work 4.16 to today, it has depreciated nearly 300%. That is why you find the central governor, the government, always saying that recapitalization. If you brought $100 million in 2016, I bet you today you are not holding more than equivalent of maybe $10 million.
Yes.
And don't forget, you have shareholders to pay, as the taxman said. Yes. You don't exist in the moon. You exist on the earth. People have put their money in it and they want return. Shareholders want return.
Exactly.
And if you're going to, somebody in Ivory Coast is going to give you $10 million and somebody in Ghana is giving you $3 million. If you put it on global box, where would you invest? You will have to exit.
Right.
So for me, it is only a beginning for us. Like he just said, if we don't put our microeconomics environment in a good perspective, be very concerned about it. And if we talk about it, if today inflation it is only in Nigeria that has got 30-something inflation. Go to check on Ivory Coast. Go and check on Togo. They all have a better inflation. And when people always, in Ghanaians, I don't know where we learned from. Anytime we're talking about, you say COVID, Ukraine. Ukraine, even where the war is being fought, it is not experiencing some of the things that we're experiencing. So I think people should be able to shut up from COVID. The Chinese who have the COVID and the UK people and the American, and I was in UK that time. People were, about 1,000 people were dying a day. They don't have a bad economy. We have totally mismanaged our economy, believing that we can borrow our way out. There is no way you can borrow your way out. And the borrowing has actually gone into all the factors of the economic production. And today, we are paying through our nose. And it's not going to get better. Let me make it clear. It's not going to get better.
Not going to get better?
If you get the let me end here. If you get a Bretton Woods, all that they are telling you that the economy is turning around. They're only picking data from what was 2022 and 2023. They haven't even moved further.
To 2024.
I'll give you one statistics. I'll give you one data before I end. And let Dr. Evans
Right.
I'll give you one data. One frightening data in the banking sector, which you hear people talking about resiliency of the banking sector. My brother, if you look at the non-performing loans from 10 years, we are hovering between 11% and 24%, averaging 16.9. And I want to make this statement clear. Any country, according to Dutchman and Cook and Dietrich, a work in 1998 from IMF, any country that has more than 10% of your non-performing to your total asset, your banking sector is what is described as fully fledged crisis. I didn't say it. It is a literature produced by IMF in 2020, and it has been consistently used. Ghana, let me give you some figures. I have the global non-performing ratios for 2022. There are only 3 countries in this world we beat. We beat Ukraine, 38, Guinea-Bissau, 55, Chad, 29%. Then you come to Ghana, 15% in 2022, out of about 80 countries that is on the survey. So, and when people talk about the English, our banking sector is resilient. If it's resilient, little shocks cannot move us. The banking sector is not resilient. Okay. Because the key indicators in banking resilience is solvency. Solvency is one of the key.
And the banks are not, according to your data.
Sorry?
You said the banks are not solvent according to the data you have and the ones that you have provided.
The data is clear. Any country that your non-performing is above 10%, and ours have hovered between 11 to 24.9 as a December.
Right. Let me go to Dr. Evans J. I'll come back to you, Dr. Echahine. Doc, I don't know if you agree with Dr. Echahine. He's cited many examples with data to prove that there is bad economic leadership. He cited NPLs, he cited inflation, he cited too much borrowing, he cited taxes, which was started by Dr. Francis Timo. And if you agree, we have been in an economy where everybody believes that we should move from borrowing, we should move from taxation to production. And that's how come we saw programs like the 1D, 1F, we saw the One Village, One Dam, we saw industrialization agenda. And it's not been by one government, but successive governments believe and agree, I'm sure, that we need to move towards production. Meanwhile, we are still in this problem, blaming COVID, blaming Ukraine war, and Dr. Echahine says we cannot blame those 2 major economic factors, external factors anyway.
So when you have a senior-most person like Dr. Echahine talking, it is quite difficult to come back and then start to have a rebuttal. Most of the key points that he's given are actually very, very factual. As we are all aware currently, the entire world is having an economic crunch. This is something that we cannot all deny. It is factual. And Ghana is actually having its own share of the global economic crunch. Now, what is actually happening within our country is as simple, and I'll give you a very simple example. I'll not talk about COVID, but I'll talk about what we saw during COVID. During COVID, when some people had COVID and they were infected, based on the underlying ailments they had, their situation was aggravated.
Right.
In other words, based on the physical ailments they had, their situation will be better or be worse. What has happened with the global economic crunch, with COVID-19, Russia, Ukraine, and everything, is that it's exposed all of us in terms of our economic resilience to some of these force majeure, unforeseen contingencies. The first thing that I would like to say is that in the history of Ghana, our politicians and the managers of our economy were literally forced to be honest. And when I say we're literally forced, we got to the point where we needed to accept that the situation in which we find ourselves as a country is not the best. And for us to first move from there, we needed to acknowledge. I want us to handle this discussion today not as just critiques. I don't want us to handle it as people who are just having a discussion. I want us to be problem solvers, solution providers. Now, the reality here is that I'll give an example of the domestic debt exchange program. Honorable Dr. Jonah Pontuekuma, may he so rest in peace, was a very good friend of mine, stood in Parliament House and said that the MPP would never go to the IMF. Few months down the line, the MPP, as a government, realized that the debt to GDP ratio, which had gone beyond 80%, had reached a level that we term as unsustainable. In fact, you need to be below 55%. Now, for us to go beyond 80%, when the threshold is below 55%, it means that we've reached unsustainable levels. The leaders and the managers of the economy swallowed their pride and said, you know something, we accept we've messed up, or we didn't do this, or we didn't prepare for this. Can we come back to the table and tell Ghanaians, you know something, I have two options on my table. To act as if I have always been right, or to realize that there is a mistake that I did that I could correct. Let's start by first and foremost going to those who can help us. When you go to the IMF, for example, the IMF does not come in and then impose policies on you. They first come at a roundtable discussion, and then they do an evaluation and an assessment. That evaluation and assessment, they will now pick all the indicators and show you the red zones. The red zones are the areas or the thresholds that are unsustainable or unacceptable. You, as a country and the managers of the economy, would have to now come up with solutions to bring these thresholds within acceptable limited rate. So what does Ghana do? We realize that instantly, we, together with the local creditors or debts and the external debts, are unsustainable if we are not honest with the people. Right. So the managers of the economy then come and say, you know something, let's do domestic debt exchange. Two options here. Option one, I would act as if everything is okay, and I will keep paying you till in 2 years I can't pay you anymore. Option two, let me be honest with you and tell you that we've reached a critical point at which I need you and I to help us salvage the situation. Forget about partisan politics. Forget about everything. We are in this mess together. What can we do to save it? The moment they put in this domestic debt exchange program, we moved from above 80% to below 69%, and hopefully to achieve 55% in 2025. What did this do? Automatically, it has reduced every liability in terms of debt and giving us more room to be able to have other social interventions, including commercial interventions, that will be able to help. You rightly said, and when I say you rightly said, you mentioned that whenever there is, and this one for the sake of the listeners, I'll break it down. Whenever there's any budget deficit, and budget deficit is simple, right? I want to speak in plain language so that they understand. Whenever our expenditure lines outweigh our revenue lines, in other words, they are not sustainable, we have that option where we would decide three things, and you mentioned it. The first one is for us to use taxation. In other words, we use taxes to raise the revenue to match the high expenditure. The second one is austerity measures. What it means is that we cut our cloth according to our size. So we reduce our expenditure lines. And that is where you see things like people talking about the V8s and buses, ministers and stuff using bus and cutting down other costs and the size of all those stuffs. We reduce it and then freeze down employment and stuff. Then the last one is productivity. So as a country, where we need to focus more on is that industrialization and that productivity. We need to get to that point where we've put in a system that's an enabling environment that will make the cost of doing business in Ghana very, very acceptable. Why would these multinational corporations believe in the country? It's very simple. There are so many factors that we can give, but among all of them, Dr. Tuyahene cited it. Every multinational corporation coming is actually, most of them are listed, okay? Listed companies. So when they are listed, it means that they are using other people's money to run the business. And for that reason, there is what we call return on equity. So that equity or that investment that has been made, they need to look at a commensurate return. But I need to put this thing here. You see, we are making it look as if it is only happening in Ghana. Around February, there was news about 10 multinational corporations leaving Nigeria.
Okay.
As we're talking about, Société Générale Ghana, Société Générale, not Ghana, Société Générale are leaving Morocco with over 300 branches as compared to Ghana with 40 branches.
Okay.
They are leaving Morocco with over 750 million in assets. They have left Mozambique. They are going to leave Equatorial Guinea. They are going to leave Congo. They are leaving Cameroon. They are leaving Mauritania. They are leaving Ghana. So this is something happening across Africa. We saw it with Barclays Bank. We saw it with Standard Chartered. Barclays Bank left and NAPSA came in. There is this thing that we need to say as we are talking to those who are managing our economy. We need to also talk to the multinational corporations. There is a great miscalculation. By the way,
yes, that's the question I had put earlier. But you go on, please. You go on.
Yes, I worked with a multinational corporation. I worked with Société Générale. I worked with them in France. I worked with them in Morocco. I worked with them in Ghana before I moved into academia and consultancy. The great miscalculation is that nobody has ever said that doing business in Africa is easy. We all know these indicators. But you see, you cannot bring what you do in France to Ghana. You see, the Nigerian banks are thriving. Why are Nigerian banks coming to Ghana and thriving? And the European banks coming to Ghana and not thriving? Because they are working with the system. And the reason I want to give this fact is very important.
Right.
The banking sector, we have the retail banking, and then we have the corporate banking. Now, with the retail banking, we need to understand something. In the West, the retail banking is one of the major sources of their income. Why? Because they run a trust system. What is a trust system? A trust economy is where we can identify everybody's home, we can identify everybody's credit score, we can find their homes. For that reason, people are able to use credit cards. And because they use credit cards, they spend monies that are not theirs and pay back later. In our economy, we are running debit cards. How many banks in Ghana run credit cards? So what it means is that the banks are obliged to work more on loans. And you see, if you run more on the retail side, and that is the reason why, for example, Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, with this whole digitalization agenda and everything, with this whole property addressing system, with this whole national identification card, eventually we'll be able to trace every Ghanaian. We already have the credit score, but it becomes easier when people who borrow money can be identified. It would reduce the level of collateralization in our system because we can know them by their national Ghana card. We can know them by their GPA address. We can find where they are. It's linked to their driver's license. It's linked to their properties. It's linked to that. If we get to that point, these banks that are exiting because they are not making so much money in the retail sector as they make in the West would want to relook at it. Let's not forget, HFC Republic Bank came in. Barclays, APSA came in. What is happening is that though some are leaving,
others are coming in.
So it is not something where I want us to let it look like it's some doom and gloom happening. There is a real problem we are facing. The managers of the economy have been honest. They've swallowed their pride. Mechanisms are being put in place. Are you aware that the capital adequacy ratio today,
Yes.
there is $250 million allocated by the World Bank and IDA to help with banks? In addition to that $250 million, there's a $500 million allocated by the governor, by the Bank of Ghana. All of these things are meant to help with the increase in the capital adequacy ratio. And these are mechanisms that are being put in place. So I want us to have this discussion.
So if I get the point right, of course, you agree that the economy probably hasn't been managed well, but it is not only that, but also over-calculation, for example, by these multinational companies.
Yes.
Right.
So the multinational corporations, if you pick them, for example, you work in a multinational corporation, you have the top executive CEOs or the C-suites. They bring their people from out there and they are treated like expatriates. You have one person at the top whose salary is about 10 times or 20 times that of the ordinary Ghanaian, happening all over the place.
Yes, I get that, and I agree very much with that. But kindly indulge me. I'll go on a quick break. When I come back, I'll run to Francis. And I think that because of time, we'll move into how it is impacting and what we should do as an economy. I mean, from your initial comments, you have made some submissions on that. But let me quickly take a very quick break, and I'll come back. Please indulge me, gentlemen. We are back from the break, but let me come to you, Francis. And lots of issues have been raised, including bad economic management, including over-calculation, and like we said, too much expectation on the part of the multinationals. But let's delve into how it's impacting our economy. The youth of Ghana, employment, the GDP, the productivity of production of goods to supply households, and so on and so forth.
So Kwesi, you realize that it's not only impacting on the multinationals. GUTA members have been crying about the exchange rates. Yesterday, I met a gentleman who imports used cars. And he was saying that the way the dollar is going, if he's not careful, the amount that he has borrowed to import the cars, he will be in debt. And therefore, he wants to pay off the debt and then wrap up his business. That tells you how...
And stop the purchase of car business.
Stop it, because...
But they increase the prices of the cars per the exchange rate.
He does that and nobody buys it.
Because the Toyota Corolla is costing almost 200,000 Ghana cedis now.
Even the new cars, VW, just was crying that so the whole of the year they've just sold about 6,000 units of cars. Meanwhile, they have the capacity to sell more. So the demand is not there. So whilst all these hardships are coming, you realize that income levels have almost remained the same. But come to the impact, clearly, Glovo is going to affect the young guys who used to do that moto and then they'll be delivering it. And these are people who don't have any job to do. And when Glovo came, they could deliver goods to you in your office and also make a living. That is a direct impact that we can see. Other companies may come in, yes, but they may come with their own strategic directions, which could even sometimes lead to redundancy and then job cuts. So these are impacts that we are going to see, even when it comes to tax revenue itself. Certainly, government is also going to lose. If before we're getting, let's say, 10 million cedis from them, now they've gone. And so we're not going to get that. And for me, I think that it's impacting on businesses and everything. And I believe, I'm happy Dr. Evans mentioned that, yes, the managers has admitted it humbly and something is being done. Now he asked for solution. I think that it's getting to a point where we just have to look inward and see how we can take the austerity measures that Dr. Evans mentioned. If revenue is not coming, why can't we cut the expenditure and then live within our means? When are we going to say, okay, this year's budget is going to be in a surplus, or at least reduce the gap? come to the budget. What are we going to do when it comes to tax revenue? You realize that most of the times when we are introducing taxes, we look at the indirect taxes. And from 2023 up to today, too many indirect taxes have been introduced. And some of them have even been recalibrated in such a way that they've made it in the form of a cost. For example, the GET Fund, the COVID, and then the NHIL. Businesses are crying that the way you have now made it as a cost, it is not good for them, though it's bringing money to government. But at the end of the day, the business sector, the business units, which we're supposed to allow them produce, now we are now more or less suffocating them, and they are unable to produce. At the end of the day, tax revenue is not going to come in. So if you listen to some commentaries that the GRA sometimes run, they're saying that VAT is increasing, but it is increasing at a decreasing rate. In other words, how much we're supposed to collect, we are not getting that much because the numbers are not coming in. You can't even bring any container to the port and then be able to clear it, like some of the business communities. So I think that we need to go back to our tax revenue,
right,
try to see how we can modernize it, collect more.
And not increase it.
And not increase it.
Because we had cut taxes some time back, and now we are reintroducing a lot more.
And that is what I think is hurting the business community the more.
Right. Let me come to you, Dr. Chahine. I'm sure you've listened to your colleagues speak. Now my point is about the impact on the economy, the young people of Ghana, employment, and so on and so forth. And what do you think we should do? Briefly.
Thank you very much once again. I think I want to also react to what Dr. Ivan said. You know, if you talk about industrialization, you don't talk about the agrarian economy. I mean, there is no way we can go forward. Let me give you some figures before we talk about it. Rice importation costs us $1.2 billion every year. Poultry, 400 million. We import tomatoes from Burkina Faso, a tune of 400 million. Onions. Somebody living in a Sahelian country exporting to a rain belt economy. Look, I have a little problem with this your industrialization. I have recently traveled to somebody is doing rice, and I traveled to say it. Look, the question is that if you are importing 1.2 billion, your city is running. You have no good strategy to say that the next 3-4 years, I want to bring this rice importation to, say, 100 million. Poultry, tomatoes. You don't need you don't need any sciences, because those in the Sahelian economy are exporting to the rain belt economy. I think this is the most disgraceful thing that has happened to Ghana's economy. I will say without fear of favor, because my father was a chief cocoa farmer. And my mother used to export tomatoes to Waga. We used to call it Waga. My mother.
Yes, I remember. I remember those days when we used to do
my late mother. And we sit here and we talk about all the economics, all the English. We cannot even feed ourselves. Now we bring cars to somebody to come and manufacture cars. And what's the taxman saying that? The marginal propensity even to save is negative. So that car, who is going to buy it? Instead of you looking at where your competitive and comparative advantages are great, you have left it. 1D, I have visited 1D of the projects. I've visited about 5 of them. There's nothing to write home about. So my advice is that all is not lost. We should reposition ourselves and know that we are in a Greek economy, and we should stop this environmental degradation that is going on. Yesterday, I went to some of the Asiwa forest or something. What I saw there is nothing the English we are sitting here and talking about. I'm prophesying. I'm not a prophet. We'll be importing water in the next 5 years.
But
why can't we stop it?
We have some, Doc, we actually have some malls who have water that is not produced here in the country. I've seen, I think, 1 or 2 of them. But let me come to you, Dr. Dua, and about the.
What I'm going to say is that, let me finish.
Right.
What I'm going to say that solution. let them sit down, the managers of the economy, and whoever is coming to power, he must reposition himself that Ivory Coast, like Cote d'Ivoire, currently, if those of you don't know, they don't import, is it palm oil or oil palm? They used to import it from Indonesia.
All right.
They're buying from Ivory Coast.
All right.
We sit here, we can't produce anything. And we're talking about industrialization. Why don't you use your competitive advantage in the areas where you have the facilities and resources, and stop this forest degradation and illegal mining?
Right.
We speak so many good English in this country.
Let me go to Dr. Tuahine now, and the figures for me are staggering. For example, the $1.2 billion importation of rice, and the poultry 400 million, and so on and so forth. We've had planting for food and jobs. We all know that we should be turning our energy towards productions like that. But let me still ask about what you think is the impact.
I've been to some of the sites.
Impact
of anything that has government in it.
The impact of the exit and your final advice.
Anything that has government in it, it doesn't work. We should encourage the private sector, create enabling environment. As I spoke to you, yes. Somebody has bought a land, 1,500 acres, doing rice. One politician is now cultivating cassava and irrigation where I went. And somebody has bought a land now doing rice. These are private sector. Anything government goes in, it doesn't succeed. Rather encourage the private sector.
All right.
And give
So let me go to Dr. Dia now. Doc, let me go to Dr. Evans now for purposes of time. So, Dr. Evans, if you can hear me, I was asking, let me jump the other one, but come back now to what do you think is the impact and what should be the way forward, briefly?
So I think for me, honesty in all our political, economic dialogue is very important. With all these multinational corporations leaving, I'll pick just one case scenario. If you pick the case of Société Générale, for example, if Société Générale should be acquired in terms of merger and acquisition, let's even assume that they acquired or there's a takeover by another bank in Ghana. What it means is that when two branches that are in close proximity, one of them has to be closed. That means jobs will be lost. If it is a new company like Chorus or Vista that is coming in from outside, then it means that business will continue as usual. And the last option is Société Générale does not find a buyer, so therefore they deplete their assets by reducing over time to make it something that people can buy. So the reality on the ground here is that there is a degree to which jobs can be lost. We should acknowledge that. And this is not something pleasant to say, but the first thing that you have to do as a policy analyst is to tell the truth as it is. Mm-hmm. There would also be a reduced level of investment. If somebody sees that a huge multinational corporation has exited, it affects definitely what other investors would also look at. Mm-hmm. But the good thing is we've had cases where one is leaving and one is coming, which means that while people are not seeing return on the equity, others think that there's an opportunity for them. There will be reduced tax revenue, which our tax expert has already mentioned. There's also going to be a bit of knowledge transfer disruption because often every institution would have a certain level of knowledge that has been acquired over the period, and there'll be that gap, and then we suffer over a period for it. Now, for me, as it stands today, we have already talked about, I'll say this about the ruling party now. MPP's manifesto they gave, I have read it over and over and over and over. And yes, every solution we need as a country is in that manifesto, the 2016 manifesto. However, the problem we have is the correct implementation of these ideas. We've talked about planting for food and job. Mm-hmm. The policy in itself is one of the best ideas you can think of. What happened to its implementation? That is what the managers of the economy have to just say. All right. Like we've done with the domestic debt exchange program, let's sit down, have a diagnosis. And then when we do that diagnosis, we come and then we correct it. Okay. We cannot keep on importing rice. Right. We need to eat what we plant. We need to wear what we are. So things should be happening right here. And I believe that we'll be able to get that.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I had to take the final round from you in 30 seconds.
See,
We are being cut.
I think bottom line is whichever government comes next year is going to struggle. So we need to focus on more tax revenue, no new taxes. Let us have a clear policy that deals with the informal sector. Property tax, we need to go back and revisit it, and then protect business community. Policies that will protect the business is what we should pursue.
Francis Timor is a tax analyst, Chartered Institute of Taxation, Ghana. Dr. Evans Juya is financial economist and international financial consultant. Dr. Richard Tuahine is a banking consultant. They've been the experts tonight for us, analyzing the exit of some multinational companies from the economy, citing issues of strategic realignment and unfavorable operating circumstances. My name is Kwesi Afriye. Thank you very much for doing the watching. This has been Bottom Line. We say business at the speed of thought. Good evening.